Chapter 4. Prisoner. Io did catch up with me later that day. My anxiety had increased with every customer that I had managed to reach by dodging him, and by then I had realized those words that had slipped out of my mouth before I had filtered them had enraged him more than I had even imagined. I had gone far too far by saying what I had. He was so furious with me that he gave me such a beating and threatened to end me. My bravery and jest melted away at his mention of such a word. A beating I could take. I could just picture Felicia and all the darkness evaporated. But when he mentioned getting rid of me, I realized my emotions had clearly overruled my finely tuned thought process in that stupid moment of defiance. I had endangered my very chance to continue seeing Felicia, my one true reason to endure the very monotony and darkness of the workhouse. I took his beating, allowing him the satisfaction, and I begged him not to discard me. Eventually, he conceded and told me that if I ever disobeyed his commands again, he would not hesitate to do it. From that moment on, I ensured that every sight he had of me emulated work and subservience, and every word I spoke to him was filtered and firmly from logical thought. But beneath the surface, I secretly allowed myself to continue being a someone. I was Kentaro, after all. When I was alone, at the top of the stairs away from Io's watch, I continued to explore books and thoughts that allowed me to further understand what it was to be me. And when I was serving customers, I would find myself stealing glances at my appearance from my reflection in their window. But beyond the inner ponderings of my mind about who I was and the curiosity of my form, I mostly just counted the customers till Felicia returned. Each dull and boring face further marked longer to wait, yet also increased the excitement and longing churning inside me to gaze at her beautiful face again. I had been over and over 1,000 different things to say to her, allowing my mind to play out our next conversation. To my delight, after only 67 customers, she returned. I caught a glimpse of her waiting at the window as I finished the final touches of an article I had written for number 67. The rude customer had tapped the glass impatiently the whole time I had been writing. I stood abruptly from the desk, my heart pounding, hardly willing to wait till I had given Mr. 67 his requested text. The chair rocked backwards, threatening to go over and clatter to the floor. I grabbed it and softly brought it safely down, afraid Io might hear. Not long, I thought, as I dashed over to the waiting customer as quickly, but as gracefully as I could muster, given the turmoil of emotions running riot inside me. Come on, I found myself impatiently thinking, as Mr. 67 eyed my article from behind a thick monocle. Yes, good, he muttered, as he read it out loud. Oh, yes, very nice point, he agreed. I found my fingers tapping nervously at my side. I was so close to seeing her again. Just this man stood in my way. Okay, yes, this will do, I suppose, he concluded. The man turned and waltzed off. Not even a thank you. The excitement increased, and with it the anxiety. What if I said something stupid? Or I hesitated? Customer waiting. Quick about it, Io's stern voice broke in. Yes, master, I subserviently replied, and dashed over to the window, putting a delicate flower in my top pocket, ready to show her. I arrived. My heart was thumping, threatening to burst from my chest. I looked up, and there she was, her chocolate brown eyes full of gentle warmth. She looked back, meeting my eyes, and we both stood silently lost in each other's gaze. Her face erupted into a bright smile, and I found myself smiling back. Hey, she said. What do I say? I wondered. I had imagined this meeting thousands of times. I had let uncountable greetings play out in my mind's eye, followed by excitable and well-composed conversation while serving those dull 67. But now I was here, standing transfixed by her gaze. My mind was blank, and my tongue-tied mouth turned its back on me. I had to say something. Quick, quick, say something, I thought. Hey, was all I could manage. I like your new flat cap, she said, eyeing my face. This, I said, glancing around cautiously. It's so the master doesn't see this, I continued while discreetly removing the hat. Her whole face lit up. Wow, she uttered. I love your green hair. It really suits you, she added. Yeah, I love it too. I was tired of the dull, boring look. The green felt, well, it felt more me, I said. I quickly placed the cap back on my head, defiantly leaving my fringe exposed so only she could see it. Oh, it really does suit you, Kentaro, she said, staring at me. I stared back. Then we both chuckled. So how was your day? I asked. It was okay, thanks. But, she said, her sentence halting. But what's wrong? I alarmingly asked. Oh, nothing, it's just... She stopped again, and I noticed a slight subtle change in the warmth of her complexion. I found myself wondering if Felicia suffered from the same struggle to speak I had felt earlier. It's okay. You can tell me, I said, raising my eyebrows in concern. She nodded. Well, Kentaro, my day was absolutely fine. It's just that I found myself distracted. I suppose, if I'm honest, I missed talking to you, and... she managed to say. Then her face went a little red and she looked away. Hey, I said. I've been distracted too, and I too have so missed talking to you, Felicia. I blurted out, my mouth outmaneuvering the logic of my mind. She looked back, grinning intently. I felt my face respond, and there was an odd sort of silence that wrapped around us and seemed to last for an eternity. So, what is your life like? I found myself saying, immediately regretting the strange question. My life, she responded, pausing. Well, I live in a small but lovely house, which is just a few minutes from my bustling uni. That sounds nice, I replied, gently smiling and nodding. And what is your uni life like? Oh, it's great, though I often find it a bit easy. But I have a fun bunch of friends that help to make the days feel more exciting. There's Jessica, Rosie, and Delia. They're so funny and often make me laugh. They always tell me I shouldn't study so hard and be so serious, but I enjoy it and want this last year to be my best. I continued nodding, then paused. And what about when you're not studying? Do you have any hobbies? I asked, curious to find out everything I could about her. Well, I like to spend a lot of time in my room reading, and in the... But a tap of Io's cane disturbed her sentence. I knew he would be keen for me to finish soon, but I would not let him steal a single moment from us. Not till Felicia was ready to go, anyway. How about you, Kentaro? She said, pausing to reformulate. I mean, do you have a hobby or like to go out? I don't have any experience of such things, though recently I found examples of recreation in books rather curious. So can you leave to do things? She asked, lowering her voice. It's not something I've thought about or needed before, but no, I can't. I'm not allowed. I have to work most of the time, and when I can, I rest, I softly whispered, ensuring Io wasn't close enough to overhear. She covered her mouth in a small gasp. So are you a prisoner? She asked. I nodded, realizing she was right. Why are you a prisoner here, and how long have you been here? I don't really know. All I have ever known is the importance of work. Io ensures I work hard. I have no idea where I even came from, but imagine I was born here. She looked down. Her eyes began to glaze over, and before I could say something to bring back her smile, a few tears fell from her eyes. "So why don't you just leave? Wait until this IO guy isn't looking and go," she asked, wiping her tears away. "I've never thought about leaving before. In the past there was only work," I replied. But just then I sensed IO's gaze on us, so I dropped to a barely audible whisper to continue. "Even if I wanted to, I can't. There are no doors here. Only windows. Escape would be impossible, and..." I glanced at Io and mouthed, "Io has definitive control over me." She looked into my eyes. "I don't want to believe that. It isn't right, you know," she said firmly, but then glanced around and began to look agitated. She became hazy, a sudden fog falling outside, blurring her beautiful face. She held her hand to the glass and I did the same. Then abruptly, she was gone. I felt a pang of sadness and missed her already, as I looked longingly at the empty window. But before I had a chance to compose myself, Io was looming over me. He pulled something from my top pocket. The flower, I remembered. I had meant to show her the flower. I had found it for her, but it was too late. Io threw it down and stamped on it, grinding it into the floor. Next, he wrenched the hat from my head and stamped on it too. I felt scared, but wasn't sure why. I had obeyed him. What had I done wrong? He grabbed me by the scruff of the neck. "Let me remind you, you serve the workhouse and belong to us. Remove all fanciful thoughts of existence beyond this place." He seethed, his teeth gritted and his face red with rage. He must have overheard our conversation, I realized, fear gripping me. He lashed out. The first blow knocked me backwards. Without hesitation, he was upon me again, beating me around the face and on the chest. I fell, only to feel his boot kicking me in the ribs. It stung and the room began to spin. But still he kept on, till I lay broken, my body refusing to move. Then his angry face leered into my cloudy vision. "I told you what would happen if you tried to disobey me, didn't I?" he snarled. "I have been more than kind to you, letting you work here. But you schemed about leaving. You disregarded my rules and have shown a blatant display of..." He paused, scowling and shaking, "of identity." He slapped me, but my body was already beaten numb. "You rude, impotent, rebellious child. Your services are no longer required," he spat. I was so filled with fear. I wanted to run so far from there and not look back, but my body wouldn't work. Instead, tears filled my eyes. I held the image of Felicia, her dear, dear smile, in my mind. I held it with all my might. It was the only thing that I had left. Then Io's face twisted into an uncontrollable fury. I felt a jolt of him slapping me again, but my body barely registered it. "Felicia," I managed to utter. "Felicia, Then I felt his cold hands wrap around my head. A screaming pain shot through me, and the room began to fade. "Felicia," I mumbled, her image the only thing left in my mind. I grasped it with my all. I tried to blink my eyes, to feel my body, but coldness filled me.